Welcome to the our feature on Thursdays, focusing on the African child. Now, the saying, life goes on after two people meet and, things go the way they go and they separate, whether in marriage or just a partnership. But along the way, there would have been offsprings, children as well. And people move on and find new partners and decide to build a life together. But it goes beyond that. It's also about bringing together children who may have different experiences, different ideas of what family really looks like, and sometimes complicated feelings about a new partner entering their lives. It can raise difficult questions. Who gets to set the rules, for instance, and how much authority should a parent have, and what happens when biological parents disagree on discipline and the like. So to shed more insight and to empower us on how to navigate this challenging situation, let me welcome my guest on the line, Julia Mathabathe, clinical psychologist with a special interest in children. Julia, a very good morning to you. Welcome to Channel Africa.
Good morning, Ernest. Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed. Thank you for your time. Now, for many blended families, the challenge is finding that delicate balance, right, between respect, authority, between making space for the new relationship and honoring the ones that had already existed long before these two parents met. What does that transition really look like psychologically?
Yeah. So that's a really, really great question, Ernest. For children, we need to understand that prior to the step-parents meeting, these children had their own family unit going on with their own set of rules, their own set of boundaries from their biological parents. So the adjustment into now the blended family unit for the child psychology can be a bit confusing, which needs a lot of support and consistency.
Yeah, yes, indeed. I would imagine the estimation rather by parents cannot be understated, right? As they meet and have these butterflies about each other, which in of itself is a beautiful thing, but there are these delicate individuals that need to be primary in terms of ensuring their well-being as well.
Hence, the importance of communication with our children, sitting children down, explaining, giving children context in terms of what is going on. How do we now define the nature of this relationship? Who is this new man in my life to you, or who is this new woman in my life to you, so that the children understand exactly the change that's been happening in their lives. Because remember, like we say, they had a life before, and children tend to grieve their parents a lot in terms of, there's a system that I knew before where my biological mom and my biological father were there. Now there's a step parent in. So communication really, really helps children to make sense and make meaning of this new change that's happening in their lives. We constantly have to involve the children in our decision-making skills, decision-making regarding our relationships. Obviously, it will be age-appropriate.
Indeed. But what happens when a step-parent, for instance, assumes a parental role even before the child has emotionally accepted that relationship to start with? And how can this affect trust, attachment, and the child's sense of security?
Yes. So children need trust. Once a child trusts an adult, everything else goes well. However, how does trust come about? Consistency will influence the trust. When a parent is consistent, when in this instance we're speaking of mostly the step parent, when the step parent is consistent, when the step parent is respectful and listens more with empathy towards the children rather than judging, because once this child feels judged, it feels like now the step parenting has to be forced, especially things like being called mama, prematurely, being called papa prematurely, because this child is still trying to make sense. I will constantly repeat that. So if we have a sit down, we communicate with our children. As soon as this child feels like this person sees me, this person hears me, then that's when the trust comes. Hence the discipline that will follow after will be a bit easier. The child won't be as resistant because there is a relationship that is being formed. There's a rapport that's being formed where the child sees the step parent as actually someone who cares and they can trust.
So then, Julia, how does an adult, a parent, step or otherwise, handle this situation? I mean, you just mentioned something interestingly. It is at least part of our cultural norms. You introduce an adult, you say, Ki me Julia or Ntate Joseph. But in this instance, it means Ntate in the true sense. So, you know what I mean? There's now an overlap between Ntate in a form of respect, but this could be misunderstood as, is this now my new Ntate, my new dad or mom?
Yeah. So it will depend. In most of our African cultures, we would say even malume or uncle, where a child now has to transition. But this child will know their biological uncle as, my mom's brother or my dad's brother, right?
Yeah.
So now what happens? How do we define who is this person? And being honest with children, I usually tell, or rather suggest to parents that we need to really acknowledge our children's emotions and also respect their logic in terms of these, as small as they are, they can think. Small as they are, they can observe. So in most cases, when we are honest with our children, I always say, especially when it's age appropriate, we slowly, gradually introduce this person into our lives as someone that I spend time with. Because if it happens also aggressively and quickly, it creates a lot of confusion within the child. And the parents, the biological parents, have the biggest role and power in terms of how will the children accept or reject the step parent. How things, the foundation from the beginning, how this person comes into our lives will determine or mostly influence how the child perceives this person into our lives.
And then there are cultural norms. I mean, you can imagine it's difficult just from a race point of view, blending families. But when you have this excess baggage, this used to be mom's chair or dad's cup of coffee, and and now it's been used by this guy. But then, on a serious note, there are cultural differences wherein another parent has moved on and they will have custody of the kids for one weekend and get exposed to different cultural norms there and come back here. Yeah, it's a conundrum, right?
Yeah, it is. And again, when we explain to our children what happens clearly, without any possibility of confusion, so that we express and we explain things clearly to our children in terms of this is a setting where we used to be at. However, now we have two settings, which ultimately may become one setting where everyone will be inside. Because remember, our children come from a space where there's a way that they're used to doing things. There's a culture in which where they come from, a space where they were brought or born. There's a way that how things were done. And we need to constantly remember how jealous, in a positive way, our children are of their parents. Mostly I say children have entitlement issues, which is not a bad thing. They mostly want to own or they love owning their parents because that is the most consistent person they know, the most person that's been there for them for warmth, for food, when they're sick and all of that. Now, when this person comes in, there's that fear or anxiety of, will my position still be available? Will my mom or my dad still see me the same? There's competition amongst the stepchildren as now siblings as to, will I be the same person to my mom or to my dad prior this? So cultural differences really play a role, all because of ownership and sense of self, because children have a way of who they are, how they identify themselves in their own system. Now they have to adapt to a new system.
And I would imagine that Julia will pick up after the break, but just to tease the question and the conversation going forward, you can't buy your way into this, right? For instance, you can't come bearing gifts all the time and expect instantaneous acceptance from the kids. Hold on to the thought. We'll pick up on that and other interesting facts as we continue with our conversation. With me, my guest on the line, Julia Mathabathe, a clinical psychologist with a special interest in children. We're talking about blending families. More after this.
Africa's young innovators are leading the AI revolution, creating localized language models and developing smart solutions for the continent's biggest challenges. Join Channel Africa webinar under the theme AI is here. Is Africa's broadcasting ready? Then, on Wednesday, the 12th of August, International Youth Day, come join us from 10 till 11 Central African Time. Connect with global leaders and digital pioneers shaping tomorrow. Book your seat now. Visit channelafricawebinar.com. Channel Africa, the African perspective. The African child on the journal.
Oh, yes, indeed. It is the African Child on the Journal with me, Ernest Pillay. And I'll keep reminding you, if you are within earshot, you're listening to this conversation, we'd like to hear your thoughts as well. You can send us a voice note, on our WhatsApp line, +27 83 288 6684. Julia Mathabathe, a clinical psychologist with a special interest in children, is with me on this rather complex conversation we're having about blending two families from past relationships. Two people falling in love and decide to build a life together can be rather challenging as well. So, Julia, at what point do conflict, resistance, or behavioral challenges in the blended family become signs that a child is generally struggling emotionally and otherwise?
Yeah. When we see now this child, because in most cases it's usually a build up. It starts small in terms of the behavioral changes from the child, which we will label acting out, right? So a child will start to show those disrespectful gestures to the mom, and also depending on the age of the child, whether, maybe an adolescent, a teenager, and so forth. Behavioral things like rolling of the eyes, being resistant to instructions, generally discipline difficulties. Now we will see that this child is struggling. And again, it will now go back to the couple in terms of the step parents as a couple, in terms of how do they now navigate towards making this child feel seen and feel heard, so that this child, because once one child starts acting out within a family systems, it collapses the entire system. Now all other children gets involved, and the couple may also end up, disagreeing on a lot of things in terms of disciplining the children.
And that discipline, I mean, it's difficult enough to get the buy-in, and I'll call it that for want of a better word, to get a buy-in from the family you are coming into as a dad or a mom. Should that discipline or disciplinary action be put to the side and let the biological parent deal with the children? You get where I'm going with the question. Should you sit back as the one? I don't want to call the parent the imposter, but just to make sense, should they sit back and let the biological parent deal with it for a little while?
So both parents have the right to have authority, or to give rather authority to the system. The important role will be played mostly by the biological parent. So the biological parent will have to lead the way, because now the step parent will follow, especially when the trust is still being built between the step parent and the stepchild. So the biggest role, the biological parent will be the person in between the child, the stepchild, and the step parent, because when it happens quickly, the child may feel like the discipline is forced, because the child is still trying to warm up to the step parent. So I say both parents have the authority. However, the biological parent has the biggest role in terms of position to the child's life.
But I'm just thinking out loud here. Showing affection to the incoming parent, the step parent, should that also be approached with some caution as well? Showing affection, maybe a hug, you're coming in from work and hugging. But of course, I would imagine you have to consider the age of the child. If the child is still young, you want to be gentle with that, because therein comes issues of jealousy. I mean, this hug used to be meted out to mom or dad, and now here's this new person getting all this love, right?
And again, it may feel a bit premature to the child. It may feel, like you mentioned earlier, as if the step parent is trying to buy the child's love. We all know love is necessary, but sometimes it depends as to when is this love being given. If the child is given love, a hug is a beautiful, warm gesture, is a positive emotion, right? To show someone that we care for them. But if it's misinterpreted by the child based on how the child perceives the parent, then the whole meaning can be lost, in a sense that you're now intruding. Yeah, I feel like you're all over my space. You're now even hugging me, and I'm not even used to you like that. We're not friends like that. So if this is gradually done to the child, and again I repeat, the biological parent will have to lead the way in terms of what the biological parent says. It's just small things like how the biological parent speaks, the language, the approach in terms of who is this person to this child will play a big role in terms of the child um, appreciating the hug, or actually feeling like, no, you're not my mom, you're not my dad, don't hug me like that.
Yeah, it's a rather complex situation, this, Julia. But as we wrap up, I mean, what would you say are the foundations of a healthy blended family where children feel secure, respected, and feel that they truly, truly belong?
Mm. And again, Ernest, we must remember it's quite a complex space to be in. However, blended families can be a beautiful thing at the same time. I suggest that once we have respect, once there's empathy, once there's consistency within a family system, once everyone speaks the same language in terms of we, not in the system, whereby the biggest role and the will be from the played by the parents. So once there's respect, there's boundaries, there's rules that we all adhere to, things can work out very beautifully.
Okay, we'll leave it on that positive note, Julia. I truly appreciate your time and insights, rather, much appreciated. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Already, only a pleasure. Julia Mathabathe is a clinical psychologist with a special interest in children, sharing her wisdom and insights on how to navigate blending families, two people coming together. It can be beautiful, but like everything else in life, has its own highs and lows. So best you are well equipped as you enter this situation. All right, we welcome your thoughts as well on our WhatsApp line, +27 83 288 6684. 10:30 it is, Central African time. Time now for Channel Africa Sport with Figile Lingwati.